Microsoft's co-founder Bill Gates publishing a new essay on climate. It's aimed at to deliver a message ahead of COP30, and he's suggesting that the climate community should shift its strategy from temperature and emission targets to the impact on human lives. An exclusive interview on that topic. I also asked him if he is worried about whether we are in an AI bubble. Here's what he had to say.
We need to define bubble. If what we mean is like tulips in the Netherlands, that they eventually looked back and said, what the heck, there was nothing there. Those were just tulips. No, that's not where we are. If you mean it's like the internet bubble, where in the end something very profound happened, the world was very different, some companies succeeded, but a lot of the companies were kind of Me Too, fell behind, burning capital companies. Absolutely. There are a ton of these investments that will be dead ends.
And you look at all of the investments that are being made today by some of the big tech companies, some companies who are not making money on AI yet, but are making massive commitments to chip makers and data centers, and say this math makes sense?
The AI is the biggest technical thing ever in my lifetime. I mean, it is so profound, and therefore its influence is hard to overstate. And the economic value, this is basically intelligence, where you can get medical advice, or you can get a tutor, or you can get somebody to help you design drugs. So the value is extremely high, just like creating the internet ended up being, in net, very, very valuable. But you have a frenzy, and some of these companies will be glad they spent all this money. Some of them, they'll commit to data centers whose electricity is too expensive, right, that it could be done overseas. Or they'll buy a generation of chips and they won't have captured all their value before the next one comes along. But, if you want to be a tech company, you don't get to say, no, let's check out of this race.
What do you think the public appetite for this is ultimately going to be? And I ask because I think there's concerns about two things that are happening right now. One is energy costs. So there's a whole bunch of places where people want to put data centers, and the community says, no, we don't want this because we don't want to have to spend more money for power to power our own homes. At the same time, they're worried that if they actually are successful, they'll also lose their jobs.
We need to put things like terapower nuclear reactors in places where it's very clear that you're not raising the residents' electricity bills because that's being put in there. Historically, nuclear was done in a way that the utility bore a lot of that liability. That business model won't get repeated. So we need to make sure to pick locations where the economics and the political acceptance is very, very strong. We don't have permission to drive up people's electricity costs. In terms of the jobs, this is going to take some period of time. But yes, although it hasn't been seen in large numbers, over the next several years, there will be some impact on the job market. Nowadays, when you say that, some people are like, oh, how can you, say that? Isn't that going to slow the U.S. down in this race? But it's only honest for people to speak frankly about the fact this will have a big effect on the job market.
And of course, Gates is a longtime capitalist, so I talked to him about the industrial policy coming from the White House, including the U.S. taking stakes in rare earth and chip companies. Here's what he had to say.
Government operates best when it's kind of predictable. That is, when what are the tariffs going to be for the next 20 years? Because when you build a factory, so the government shouldn't be changing its policy, every year or every day, because, predictability is a very, very important thing. Understanding when the company's helping nascent technology, is it doing that for the good of the country and, and treating companies equally, or will it want to own part of those companies and if somebody has better technology, they'll favor the company they own part of. We need to understand what those policies are. Yes, I think there's a rush of people to say, wow, maybe that's how to get to the front of the line for government money. But the rules of the game we're playing are pretty unclear right now.